All right, welcome back. This will be a different video. So online, they have released the next set, Ixalan. And so if you're watching, this is the I had talked about a few of these cards before. I had looked at four of them. Two of them, I don't think I'm going to start off testing. I may get around to trying them out. But for now, the two cards I'm interested in testing are this one and then the next card, which I actually like even more. So I'll start with this one, though, because it looks like it's probably going to be the more expensive of the two, at least at first. Search for Azcanta. Maybe it is just because it's a little better in 20 life formats. But Search for Azcanta here is interesting in a couple of ways. First of all, it's kind of like a rampant growth for blue, which is a hard effect to get in a blue deck. At least it is once it flips. Secondly, it provides, well, three ways really. Secondly, it provides fuel for Snapcaster. It can provide fuel for a Yawgmoth's Will, and it of course can fuel itself clearly. But the other thing that's interesting about it is Jace Vryn Prodigy, the card I added recently, also likes this card quite a bit. And then finally, something to keep in mind is that when you after you take a look, if you choose not to put in a card in your graveyard and you still have 7 or more in your grave, you may transform this card at that time. So because this just says then if you have 7 or more you may transform it. It does not care whether or not you put if you put the card in your graveyard, then it doesn't say that. So keep that in mind. You can transform this very easily. You can have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, play search, and the top card of your deck is like the best thing you could possibly draw. You just leave it there and flip it if you'd like. So in the flip mode, it's going to be very difficult in the Breya deck to miss with this effect. So assuming it's a Jam Day Tome that works 80, 90% of the time, somewhere in that range, probably somewhere around 85%, I'm guessing, based on my threshold there. So assuming that you've got about roughly 85% of the time, this is a Jam Day Tome. If you're not familiar with the book, then I can tell you're probably a newer player, but basically Jam Day Tome is 4 mana. It's a 4 mana artifact that says 4, tap it, draw a card. This is a 2 mana enchantment that flips into a card that basically says 4, tap it, and draw a card. It looks like it says 3, but remember you're tapping the land, which is also a mana source. So you're actually tapping the land plus 3 other mana for a grand total of blue, blue 2. So I guess if you want to think about it that way, you could kind of compare it to I forget what it's called, but it's Treasure Trove or something. Anyway, it's that 4 mana enchantment that you spend blue, blue 2 to draw a card. So that's what it's going to do most of the time. But because it's so cheap against blue decks, you can muddle for it, and you can also get it into play pretty easily. And once it's in play, it's going to be tough for them to deal with. After you flip it, there's only a handful of, they need some land kill to deal with it, which they can do, anyone can do, but it's still going to be rough on them. And if they don't, then not only are you going to have additional mana, but you're going to have additional cards to go with it at the end of their turn, no less. That's going to be exceptionally hard. And the nature of the cards that you're finding with this are, you're going to be finding instant sorceries, artifacts, and planeswalkers. The main frustrations for another blue deck. So this is very good in that matchup. And in other matches, because it'll flip quickly, just being a rampant growth, you may find actually to be more valuable than the actual card draw itself. But having both is nice. This card doesn't play too well with Winter Orb, but outside of that, pretty great. And even under an Orb, I suppose having the ability to pick up, maybe this is in play as an enchantment, and you flip it on a key turn just to get some extra mana for your Orb. I suppose that could be useful as well. So the next card I'm going to look at is this Arguel's Bloodfast. This card is, if the previous card is going to make things rough for blue decks, this is going to make it almost impossible, because this starts out on the correct side first, which is the legendary enchantment side that draws you cards. This is a greed for half the cost to play and twice as much to use, but that is still a really good bargain, and it's real cheap and easy to get out and play. And again, you can muddle the mixture for it, as well as Enlightened Tutor for it, of course. So this card is going to be crazy. It's a card you don't actually want to flip. Fortunately, you don't have to. It's a may, but if you are hurting for life, I suppose, against a red deck. Just playing, at least the card's not entirely dead. Like you could play it against a red deck, perhaps not draw the card, flip it, and maybe sack a creature to gain some life. You'll get a slightly better deal out of sacking Breya for 4 life, and the 2 Thopters to gain 5 than you would if you sacked. Obviously, like that's the ideal situation where a Breya produces 9 life for you if you're in trouble against a red deck. Unfortunately, you can't actually flip it back. So this card would be a little bit better if you could flip it back. So really flipping the temple is kind of a last gasp or a desperation play. But, you know, it's good against, it's going to be good against almost all of the field. Crazy good on its unflipped side, which is where you want the power. And then the flip side will occasionally maybe keep you from losing a game you might have lost. The other thing with the flip side that there is some synergy there, some nice synergy with Vedalken Shackles. So these are the 2 cards I'm searching to pick up. I'm searching on Wiki Price and MTGO Traders. I like the MTGO Traders website though for displaying new cards. And let me show you where I expect to put them in the deck. Let's go over to here and you can check that out. So here's what I believe the deck list, well, at least this is what I'm going to start with, what the deck list is going to look like as I'm testing these new cards. So Night's Whisper came out for Arguel's Bloodfast. It is a little weaker for fixing early game hands where, like Night's Whisper, you keep a hand with only 2 lands and expect that you'll draw more lands. With this thing, you know, you'd have to play it, and then if you don't draw a land, you use it and then hope that the next card's a land, and if it's not, you know, you have to use it again and hope the next card's a land, and that's pretty slow compared to Night's Whisper, but the rest of the time it's a lot better. And of course, Night's Whisper is just a one-shot deal, generally speaking, if you aren't recurring it with Jace or something. And then this search replaced the artifact removal card that has 2 options, and I forget what it's called. Oh, a Braid. Sorry about that. So anyway, search replaced a Braid. Currently, of course, I don't have either card, so I had to set quantity to 0. But yeah, so I took out a Braid. So the thing is, I love the flexibility of a Braid. It's a great card. I like the fact that it does 2 things that I want, but a Braid is also a card that is kind of just a bad lightning bolt, can't target opponents, or Shatter, which was, for all intents and purposes, just a bad Vandal Blast. It's flexible though, and it's cheap enough that it's worth playing if you have room and you feel like you want that kind of effect. But if you want something specific, like if you want artifact removal specifically, then a Braid's not your go-to card. I don't think. It would be by Force or Vandal Blast for sure. And then if you're on the fence as far as the disenchant ability, well, the original disenchant, and there's a handful of other cards that are all comparable. Fragmentize is up there, a bunch of other cards. So I don't really mind losing a Braid much. To pick up Search, which will hopefully dig me down faster to find like my Vindicate, Dakfade, Daretti, Kolaghan's Command, or Nahiri if I do need to kill a artifact or enchantment, depending on which card I'm looking for. So I currently am also running Stoneforge Mystic. As you can see over Disenchant, this maybe will bite me. We'll find out, but for now I've got it in simply because it's a more powerful effect in a vacuum. Disenchant's just better if you're having a lot of trouble facing, you know, cards that it destroys. The rest of the time I want Stoneforge Mystic. And lastly, because, you know, I want to be the one applying the pressure rather than reacting to it. If I can do so in a way that also supplements my control oriented goals. And Stoneforge does a very good job of that since it gets Sword of Feast and Famine, or Jitte, generally speaking, typically not Clam. Typically one of these 2 cards, you're going to either control the board with Jitte or control their hand with Sword. So makes it like it's like having 2 Disrupting Scepters in a deck when you play Stoneforge and Feast and Famine together. I think that's pretty nice. So anyway, and also Jitte, which I was going to test the new equipment, like I think I mentioned earlier, the flip equipment. However, in place of Jitte, however, I think that with Arguel's Bloodfast, encouraging me to, so if you think about it, if a Jitte hit gives you 4 life, the Bloodfast, that's draw 2 off an Arguels. So the fact that Jitte can be converted directly into cards with the Bloodfast leans me towards keeping the Jitte in the deck, and it's already an extremely good card. So that's why I am not testing that switch. So that's all the changes. Oh, one last thing. I apologize. From the last video, I don't think I mentioned this, but Order of Succession, I'm not sure if I did. Order of Succession is a card that I think is going to be excellent in this format right now. I've had a tough time against it, and I think that it's going to give people a very tough time as well. This is a control magic where you have to, they get a creature of their choice, you get a creature of your choice from them, they get a creature of their choice from you. So if you don't have any creatures or any significant creatures, either or, this card still works, and the cards don't go back. Like there's no way, once it's taken, it's taken. The card doesn't target, which means you can actually steal something like an Emrakul or something that's untargetable. And so I think that Order of Succession has a lot of potential in terms of just being a problem-solving card that's also very powerful. And we lost Treachery. I've missed having a control magic effect. I wanted to put one back in. I think Order may be the card that I'm looking for. Hopefully it is. So those are all the changes, and that's what you can expect to see in the next deck. And this has been a bit of a deck tech. Now I do have some games just because I don't want to, put up videos without games for you. Of course, they won't be with the new version. It's kind of weird. So I'm not sure how this happened. I had 5 wins recently, which amounted to the last video. And then prior to that, I had, 2 losses and 3 wins. Like I was going well, and then I crashed and burned here and then started a new one and went 5-0, right? So prior to that, I had, so let's go back 5. Prior to that, I had a hit or miss off and on thing. So loss, win, loss, win, loss. And then prior to that, I had a string of 5, but I don't think that this ever made a video because I actually don't think these 5 videos are connected. I think this was actually a win from the previous round, and then I went 4-1. But I'm not sure because the math doesn't add up correctly. Like this is a perfect blocks of 5 all the way back, and I am not filtering anything other than for the days. So maybe I missed a video here. And so with that in mind, I'm going to put together a video. I'm not going to claim it's a win, but I will at least show you a string of 5 victories in a row that might have been a win that I just missed. Or if if I am playing games you've already seen, then I don't know, what are you going to do? I tried to go through my old videos just to find out, but the main thing here is I see it is if you've listened to the video this far, you definitely deserve some gameplay. And so I'm going to put a link to fast forward directly to this point in the video as well, for those of you who aren't interested in my thoughts on the deck or on the new cards. So this is against Soul Shooter, and he's playing the evil twins, Breya being the good guys and these two being the bad guys, I think. And I had to mulligan, but this is a pretty nice little hand here. I think there was a video where I had the option to do first turn talisman and I didn't, and my opponent like duressed it out of my hand, and that's why this seems so familiar to me. So I learned from that, and this time I don't do that. I don't make that mistake. My opponent plays a Mausoleum Wanderer though, which prevents me from Factor Fictioning on turn 2 like I wanted. Fortunately, I drew a Mox Opal, so I was able to play Mox Opal, Vedalken Shackles, play a land, throw away City of Traders, steal his Mausoleum guy. None of these are instants or sorceries, and now I have a little kind of weak counter spell, but I have a Force Spike for instants or sorceries. And as soon as I sack it, I'll be able to steal something else with Shackles possibly. And look at that insane top deck. I drew a Cavern of Souls, which means I have exactly perfect Breya mana here. So I get to add tons of pressure to this board. Talk about top decks. Mox Opal followed by Cavern of Souls is pretty gnarly with this hand. It was a risky start, but it's coming together very nicely. All right, so we're going to get in there with Mausoleum Wanderer and pass. My opponent can't even deluge here unless he's got like an Ancient Tomb or something, because I can just sack the Mausoleum Wanderer and counter it. So I know I'm going to at least get some damage in. And if he is to tap out on the next turn, then that frees me up to Factor Fiction. So this turn I'd really love to have drawn a land and cast Sword of Feast and Famine and hope that it sticks. Probably if it sticks, I would just win at that point. But I didn't draw a land, so I'm just going to send in. My opponent has Snuff Out. I can't really even. I mean, I Snuff Out, and I can't do anything about that at all. So he doesn't tap any mana, which means he's seen my Factor Fiction. I'm not really free to get it on the table, but I think I decide here that because I have Sword, I'm going to go ahead and cast Factor Fiction anyway, expecting he probably counters it, and then hoping to draw a land and hit him with the Sword, and then Merchant Scroll. So that's like what I'm really hoping happens here, and nope. Would have been nice though. It sounded good. Anyway, I can, however, at least get sack with Expedition Map here and go get myself an Ancient Tomb and get the Sword into play. So I still hit my land drop and it gets Force of Willed. So he forced with a, oh, what was it, Memory Lapse. This deck list right now, from what I'm seeing, is basically a carbon copy. There's a NetDeck Crom list out there that as far as I can remember, so it appears to be a carbon copy of that. Although I don't remember Mausoleum Wanderer being in it, so maybe that's different. Everything else looks pretty much exactly the same. The problem is for my opponent, he missed a land drop still, and he only has 2 cards in hand, and he's at 10. He's taken a bunch of damage from a combination of lands, Snuff Out, and so forth. So at that point, he just gives up, and I move on to game 2, question mark. I'm not exactly sure because, like I said, I don't remember how these games actually link together, but counting back, it appears I may have just missed a video, which is very possible. If you notice the time, 1 a.m., I was probably planning to make this video later and fell asleep and then forgot about it. So it does happen. All right, there's been a couple of videos, unfortunately, that's happened on. All right, so anyway, another partner, because, well, the partner mechanic is broken and people are rightly taking advantage of a broken mechanic. I would too if I enjoyed that sort of thing, but I don't. I like playing really good cards or the best cards, but I like my deck to win, not my commanders as much. Breya does its fair job of winning, of course, mostly because it's really good at preventing you from losing, which is all I want out of a commander. I don't need one that wins a game on its own necessarily with cards and so forth. I do want one that allows me to win the game by extending it, and Breya is excellent at that. It's one of the reasons I played Laurel for so long. So anyway, my opponent's got a Baleful Strix, a card I really think maybe belongs in here. I'm not sure. I like it. It's a good card. And then he goes for a Tymna, which I have to Force a Will. And I decided to do it with Spell Snare, or Pierce rather, because I'm not seeing... I have to Force a Will to Tymna because I can't let him draw extra cards. I could have disenchanted the artifact creature, but then he would just play Silas and ultimately get it back, and I'd have to Force a Will anyway. So I figured I'd wait here and Force a Will to Silas, which I expect him to play this turn. Said he hymns me. I'm hoping that the muddle sticks. Whew, it does. That was close. If he countered that, that would have been a pretty gnarly turn. And then he plays Glint Sleeve Siphoner. It's no Search for Azcanta or whatever, Arguel's Bloodfast, that's for sure. But it does have the potential to draw him some cards, so I want to get Breya down and hopefully prevent that from happening. So he needs to attack to get another energy, and then at the beginning of his upkeep he can draw extra cards. Oh, excuse me, it'll just take a little while. His creature has to live, of course, so he dismembers Breya, but that doesn't really... And then he sends in, so he gets a second energy, but it doesn't really allow him to... Like, I'm not sure... He's not going to get to draw a card here. I'm more than happy to trade a Thopter with his guy. In fact, I'm so concerned his guy might hit me and he'd have removal that I double block. Because if he had removal for one of the creatures and I single blocked, then his guy lives and then he gets to draw an extra card. So I figured one of my guys was more... It was more worthwhile to throw away one of my guys than that, than to let him have it. So he goes for a... I get some extra mana down. He goes for a Glenelendra. I disenchant Baleful Strix in response. And now I'm dealing with Glenelendra, but he didn't know I had City of Traders, so I'm actually able to cast Breya, which he can't counter. Then this is exactly what I was saying before about Breya doing a very good job of preventing me from losing. Or it would, except my opponent has Palace Jailer. I thought he was going to jail the Breya, but he jailers a Thopter. What's going on here? This is wild. Not exactly what I expected. So he does get to draw a card, but I mean, this just doesn't seem great for him. So on my turn, I go for a Dak Faden. anticipating he will counter it. But that gives him just a 1/1 Glenelendra, so now I can send in the Thopter and Breya, hoping to connect so that I can get the Monarch for the turn. And if I don't connect, well, then this is pretty good too, because I'm trading off with multiple creatures, and I've got the only creature on the board right now. All right, so he plays Silas and Timna and draws a card. This is the problem with partners, of course. I do have an Ancestral floating, and I rip a Skull Clamp. How wonderful is that? It's great because it's an artifact, which allows me to kill his Death Touch creature and send in with Breya. At this point, he decides he doesn't want to chump, which means I get the Monarch. And it makes sense because he's gonna get Timna going. And look at that insane top deck. This is where I will miss a Braid, but it certainly served me well there. Anyway, my opponent's turn, he goes and gets Trinket Mage into Dark Confidant, and the Trinket Mage got a Skull Clamp. So he's able to play Clamp and potentially Clamp right away if he wants to draw cards off Confidant. Instead, he clamps Trinket Mage, so I'll stop hitting him in the face. Seems reasonable. I wasn't going to anyway because I want to draw cards off of... I don't want to give him the ability to draw cards off of the Monarch. And look at this nice draw. I get a land to go to work around my City of Traders using my Mox, Sword of Feast and Famine, and a Swords of Plowshares and Immersion Scroll, which means I can Swords his Trinket Mage, not trigger his Skull Clamp, hit him with the Sword of Feast and Famine. He cannot block, take the last card out of his hand, and then do something with Merchant Scroll to make sure I win. And that something will be... And look at that. He couldn't Fatal Push because it was a Swords of Plowshares. That something will be go fetch Whir, cast Whir using Sword of Feast and Famine, and X equals 2, or block. Good game. I'll draw a card off the Monarch. He is going to get to draw a card once he takes Monarch back, but then I immediately take it back again and untap all my lands. Not exactly a winning strategy or situation for him. He loses some life there to a Memory Lapse plus an unknown draw, and hits me with Dark Confidant. Takes the Monarch. Clamps his Confidant, knowing that he can't allow the Confidant to continue to kill him, basically. With the Clamps at draw effect on the stack, I go ahead and Vampiric Tutor. And then I let him draw, because I didn't want him countering the Vamp. And at this point, he just gives up. And unfortunately, I don't actually remember the card that I Vampiric Tutor for. I was expecting to see it. I didn't realize he was going to give up. So what would I have gotten in this situation? I have no idea. How interesting. However, I suspect a very reasonable card might have been, I might have wanted to get more card draws, so I could have gone and got Jace, for example, or I may have gotten Mystical Teachings just to hold the line while Breya finishes up. I'm not exactly sure. How funny. Okay, well anyway, next game was against Wild Speaker 2000, and then I've got Nerdy at 30, and one more game after that, and that's it for this video. Okay, so Wild Speaker 2000 is playing what? Saska, not a blue commander. And I go ahead and keep this hand because it has Winter Orb and As Foretold, and I figure Orb against green is almost always good. Orb is generally good against everybody if you play it correctly and time it well. So he's going to get in with some Dryad Arbor damage here. Is this going to play, or are we going to bug out? What's going to happen? Let's find out. What is actually happening? I think Magic Online maybe... Yeah, that was an unexpected error. Can I replay this game? I'm going to try again. This is the joys of Magic Online. The most budgeted of budgety interfaces. They either paid way too much for something bad or way too little for something good. I can't tell. All right, so we're going to have to run through that initial turn again and then hope that this plays out. I'm just going to let it play because I don't want to jump ahead and maybe cause the glitch. I don't really know if it was because I was clicking around. Okay, well, we seem to be running. All right, so turn 2 is its Signet. Gets met with an Abrupt Decay, and I could not be happier to see an Abrupt Decay of all the times, because that means Winter Orb and As Foretold looking pretty safe right now, as well as Duretti for that matter. So I get Winter Orb down, hoping I don't have to force a will with As Foretold, but he has a witness for abrupt decay, which I can counter, so I am going to have to force a will it. And I only played orb here because I knew I could force a will a big play. And a lot of people like to tap out under a winter orb and put themselves in orb block. If you're tapped out, trying to win before the winter orb can buy enough time for you to win. So he gets an early Dark Confidant now. This is going to start, watch his luck here. He flips Inspiring Vantage. Inspiring Vintage hasn't inspired anybody in a while, I don't think. Anyway, plays a creature who, when it attacks, he gets a 2/1, so it actually hits for 3. He puts a 2/1 into play and then exiles it after combat. Kari Zev. Alright, so on my turn, I'm able to get land tax down, and with a little extra mana, I get to Imperial Seal. Now, that's not great because I'm not going to either get the card or I get to tax. I don't get both, but eventually I'll get to tax. And I had to put mana into... I was going to put mana into Zoria's Signet anyway, so I wanted to take advantage of the Signet right there, so I did. I fetched a Toxic Deluge, and the reason I cast Jitte here, you think, well, that's stupid because you need to hit... Now I need to hit a land drop. Well, I do have tax out, so provided that I hit tax, I have a Deluge coming. My opponent, Armageddon's. Maybe I don't. I am now getting my butt kicked, and look at that insane top deck. City of Traders to the rescue. My opponent is at so many lands right now. And he's killing me with a Dark Confidant. He flipped a Flame Tongue Kavu last turn. My turn, City of Traders. I have to replay a land from the graveyard and deluge down to 1 life against a red deck. Because I had to play a land that comes into play untapped, a Watery Grave, and I had to take damage off of it. Now, however, since Deluge City died, I can actually finally land tax, which is very good for the Forbid in my hand. So we'll go ahead and tax up. And I'm going to go ahead and start playing. I want to get that City of Traders into place so I can cast Coalition Relic as soon as possible. But in the short term, I'm going to go ahead and just keep playing lands that don't kill me out of the graveyard. Well, I wanted to get Forbid online first. So I am at 1 after all. And there's a target. I might be able to deal with this card if it didn't have Menace, perhaps. Or I don't know. I don't think so. Because that card actually costs you life to prevent him from drawing extra cards. So I don't want to face that. Now, luckily, Forbid is quite good with land tax, Forbid, and Crucible is kind of a loop. You pull the cards into your hand, you throw them in the graveyard with Forbid to counter something, and then you put them into play with Crucible. I did let my guard down here for a moment, but it took him a while to make a play last turn that was significant, so I go ahead and trust that I'll be able to recover. The reason I did that is because I'm trying desperately to get my commander into play with enough mana to gain some life before I just lose. I find City of Brass, that's super ironic or sad when you're at 1. So I replay a land from the graveyard that I had thrown away earlier and use City of Traders before the sack effect kicks off in order to play Breya and immediately gain some life. I should have... Well, no, I guess I was going to say I should have tithed, but actually I think I was trying to avoid tapping a land because of the orb. So I'm now at 6, which means I have a chance. The next thing I need to do is get that Jitte running. And I also need to, of course, protect my situation. So here's exactly a situation I described earlier where Night's Whisper might actually be better as the flipped version and not as Kari Zev. Then again, maybe it's just better as the Whisper. I don't know. But we're going to get in there with Jitte, and if it connects, I can clear out that Labyrinth, or that Spirit of the Labyrinth. Well, either way, I mean, as long as he doesn't kill the guy before I deal combat damage. And now, in theory, I would be able to do really good things with this enchantment running and a Jitte running. My opponent Imperial Sealed on his turn. I go ahead and just charge up for some mana. Of course, I'm not super worried about whatever he's sealed for, but I go ahead and Dak Faden as well. I can turn these cards into value, I think. Find myself a Wasteland, which I replay from the graveyard. Kill one of his untapped lands, the only one that made white and black. He is going to get to untap his other white-black land, but then he's down to only potentially casting just one card, whatever he's sealed for next turn. And provided it's not Crows and Drip, I can Forbid with Buyback. I've got tons of land now to do that with, and from there I'm going to be able to Dak Faden lands into the graveyard, turn them into real cards, replay them, cast Wastelands over and over and over. I mean, replay Wastelands. And in short order, my opponent's dead. Don't forget, Jitte has 2 counters right now, and it's ticking up. So I'm in a very well. Does it have 2 counters? No. Yeah. Yep, 2 charge counters. So, and it's ticking up. So I'm in a great spot here. So he was totally right to concede. But I thought that was a great game, and actually the game that I mostly wanted to the game that I felt was most important for this video, because one life against a red deck is like just a crazy situation to be in after getting Armageddon. So maybe my opponent Armageddon me with and put me down to nothing in play, and then one life against a red deck. It's just awesome. All right, so here I've got just a savage hand, provided my opponent doesn't disrupt it early. Nerdy at 30 here. Of always a challenging opponent, so that basic assumption may be invalidated pretty soon. We'll see. So notice I'm getting Knight's Whisper a lot, but I'm not really using it. My opponent correctly responds to my fetch land by fetching so that I don't go get a Stifle, which makes a lot of sense. Or if I have a Stifle rather, I can't play it because my fetch land was on the stack. So I'm going to, of course, play Fellwar Stone here, as it produces 3 colors that I want, including one I don't have, versus the Talisman, which only produces 2, including 2 that and none of which I like. It's neither of them are a new color for me. And then he plays Ancient Tomb Ranger of Eos. That is rough. He's able to go get himself. So a 3/2 plus a Gorilla Shaman and a Dragon Master Outcast. A Gorilla Shaman. Here I am holding Mox Opal. This is not good. I'm actually Knight's Whispering kind of in desperation. I play an untapped Steam Vents and a Mox Opal also kind of in desperation, knowing he has the Gorilla Shaman and he can just nosh on my Opal. But I felt like I needed to have a counterspell up here of some sort. And I was hoping he would only have just the one red, and then what I could do is I could remand it or Stoic Rebuttal if he tried for, depending on what he was going for and depending on what I decided to do. I knew that it left me open for Dimna Beats for him to draw an extra card here, but I didn't have at the time an answer for Dragon Master. I don't think that the game is actually playing out correctly. I don't think I drew Deluge, but perhaps I did. I may have been sandbagging it for when he got to make him like deal with Breya first and play his Gorilla Shaman, and then where he feels like he's getting ahead and then flip it on him. So we'll see. I think that could actually be the case. Oh yeah, it was. And I remember now. And look what he does. Angel of Sanctions my Breya. So I right click on Breya and tell it to go out of play rather than in play. He sends his 2/3/2s, and I'm just going to double block so that, because I don't want him drawing a card. I would have chump blocked each creature if he would have sent in that way. Just to keep him from drawing a card, because the game plan now is clear the board. So we're going to do exactly that. And Breya pops back out, and I get 2 more creatures, and then I right click on Breya and say go to the command zone instead of exile, turning off the ability to go to exile. He still hasn't played his Gorilla Shaman, and he's got 6 cards in hand, so it's not like I'm just crushing him here or anything. But at least I have the board. And I do have that Vampiric Tutor, so hopefully I will get some cards made up soon. Opponent plays Defeated Heath. Tries to dismember Breya. Because he's really low on life, I actually remand it back to his hand. He used an Ancient Tomb to play it, and now he's dropping himself down to 9. So I'm actually going to throw some more damage at him and make it 6. Because at this point, like he's pushing himself down into just kill me now kind of territory, and I'm more than happy to oblige. He does get Bruised Tarl here, but his commander, although it does give lifelink, it prevents him from using the Gorilla Shaman, which means that I can spend even more mana this turn with the Vamp. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you can see at the time I was running Disenchant. Wouldn't have been nicer if it were Stoneforge. Absolutely would have. So I'm able to play Jitte here. Equip, send in, and get the Gorilla Shaman off the table. Now I've got to deal with Bruce Tarl. It's going to give him some life, so the game plan of like just killing him is going to have to take a back seat for a little while, but we'll get there. We'll get there. So luckily the Gorilla Shaman did not get to kill my Mox Opal. In fact, didn't get to eat anything on my side of the board before it went away. And my opponent goes for I figured he'd play a Timna here, since he needs to draw some cards, and he does. And I can't afford to leak it just to tap him out. It's not a good game plan. I have to let him hit me with Bruised Tarl, which jumps him from 3 life back up to, unfortunately, 9. I could have shrunk it once to prevent 2 of that life gain, but that wouldn't have been good because I need all 3 counters to kill it next turn, which is more important to me. So he plays a Chrome Mox, which was really nice to see since I get to disenchant it at the end of his turn. And he makes a 1/1 flyer. Not too shabby. I do not mind that. And for my turn, I'm running out of gas here. As much as disenchanting a Chrome Mox was nice, I think a Stoneforge would have been a lot better. This is one of the games that encouraged me to switch. So in response to a fetch land, he plays an Aven Mind Sensor. I could have just killed it with Jitte, but I need the counters. Like, I really feel like I need the counters. So I just Mana Leak it and send in the Thopter. He blocks, and I'm going to have to exchange. But now at least I've got 3 counters on Jitte, so I can kill his commander. And here's where I cast Breya, and you cannot see it. It's an invisible Breya that's in play. But if you're wondering why my opponent's about to not attack, that would be the reason. It is some sort of bug. Also, he's at 6. So he involves Angel of Sanctions, which lets him exile Breya again. And I believe this time I actually again said to go ahead and exile it from play. I think. Or did I? Maybe I let it go. No, I let it go. So then I kill Bruce Tarl. He tries to swing in. I have my 2/1/1 flyers. He can't send his Tymna, and he passes for the turn. And on my turn, I think I equip Jitte, or maybe I just cast Breya. I think I just cast Breya, replay Breya again. I have four flyers and 2 mana up, and I pass for the turn. And on his turn, he can't really do much of anything, and at the end of his turn, I go and just untap and I throw flyers at his face and deal 6 points of damage to him that way and finish him off. So that's how it would have ended if you could have seen it. And lastly, there was this game against Brivinex. Quite a long video. Hopefully, I don't know if the longer ones work for all of my viewers, but I know they work for some of my viewers. Sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're longer. I try to cater to everybody, and mostly I just try to have fun with my interests and share them with you. So we'll see. Anyway, and here against Brivinex, my opponent's playing Tasigur, which is not good. So I get an early Azoria Signet, which I think is more important than Jace. Mana is more important than card selection early on. This also allows me to play an amazing As Foretold right here with Remand backup and Jace. Since nothing happened there, I'm just going to not do anything. I'm planning to use the Izzet Boilerworks Fastidiate Traders to avoid having to sack it. And I'm hoping to get a chance to remand his Tasigur when he tries to make the play. So we're going to go for that, since that will buy me quite a bit of time. Unfortunately, my opponent's got Mana Leak. So Tasigur down. Drew Mox Opal is not super helpful, but I do get to cast Breya here, pick up my land. So the Mox Opal is certainly not bad because it allows me to curve into a Jace right there. And my opponent sends in, strangely enough, so I'm going to try to block and see what he's got. He doesn't have anything. It's very odd. He does get a Tireless Tracker Dust Bowl combo out, though. That's pretty good. All right, so we're going to flip and throw away a land, and then that gives me enough mana to actually cast Breya and immediately kill his Tireless Tracker, which is the most important thing I could be doing. I play an Expedition map off As Foretold and pass for the turn. My opponent kills a Breya with Rexage, not As Foretold, which was, I think, a huge mistake. So I go ahead and sack Expedition map and go get Talaria West, transmute Talaria West into an Ancestral Recall, thanks to As Foretold, and immediately set myself up so I can cast Remand this turn and then cast Ancestral Vision. My opponent has a counterspell, and so I remand Ancestral Vision back to my hand and pass for the turn. So I actually pre-staged that by using Jace on my remand. That's how I was able to play it from the graveyard. My opponent then uses Cryptic Command on his turn to tap my Thopters and bounce my As Foretold. I recast and then hit my attack and kill my Jace. I recast my As Foretold and Ancestral that works. So I go for a winter orb, and at this point I've got a pretty good situation. My opponent hymns me, and I was still playing Scroll Rack at the time. Fortunately, he hymns me missing everything that matters. He misses Jace and Factor Fiction. I did have 5 cards in hand, but I didn't think I was going to get to keep both. I do. And at that point, my opponent gives up. Of course, he doesn't know I have the 2 amazing cards, but had he played his commander here, he would have found out that I have the Jace in short order, as his commander would have gone right back to his hand. And then I think he would have scooped. Then, either way, as foretold under a Winter Orb, and plus all this crazy mana that I've got, and I'm about to play, I drew a Cavern of Souls. I'm about to play an Uncounterable Breya as well. That's just way, way, way too much, or I potentially could. So, as soon as foretold ticks up to 4, I get to cast Ender Turn Factor Fiction for free and do other shenanigans. So I thought that was pretty good. So hopefully those games aren't repeats. I apologize if they are. I can't figure it out though, because, you know, like I said, doing the math, it looks like that was a block of 5. I don't know what happened, but the bottom line is my goal was to entertain you, and I didn't want to make a video where I'm just talking with no gameplay. So hopefully you look forward to checking out some games with the new cards. If you are using this stack and you're able to acquire the cards before I am, then I would absolutely love to hear from you what you think about them. But even if you haven't picked them up yet, I'm always interested in your opinion. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.